Super cool.
The Advertising Club of Edmonton respectfully acknowledges that we are situated on Treaty 6 territory, traditional lands of First Nations and Métis people. We make this acknowledgement as an act of reconciliation and gratitude to those whose territory we reside on or are visiting today. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. On behalf of the entire team at the Advertising Club of Edmonton, I'd like to thank you for being here with us today and joining us for this really exciting panel. We've all been honestly counting days towards it because it's a really exciting topic and it continues on the same line of thought for the kind of events that we've been delivering lately on the topic of DEI. So we are delighted to be hosting this event in partnership with Calgary Marketing Association and DDB Edmonton. And with that being said, I'd really like to welcome as well Sydney Stephen, President of the Calgary Marketing Association, and thank her for the continued support and the collaboration that our teams have been enjoying over the last year and more than that, actually. We are delighted to have you here with us, Sydney.
Thanks
you.
For having me. Yeah, we're delighted to be a part of it. We're, of course, still licking our wounds down here in Calgary, but I've just become like a new Oilers fan now, hoping that we're going to beat the Avs and at least Alberta is still going to be in that mix. So really honored to be part of this. Can't wait again for just another great DEI panel on this as well. And I always enjoy partnering with you guys.
All right, thank you. Apologies for that. Since I was not an initial part of the people that were co-hosting this today, I didn't have the participant rights to be able to unmute myself, hence the really awkward pause, but I'm here again. Thanks for unmuting me there. So with that being said, I'd really like to welcome Holly as well. Holly is kindly hosting the session today. And so I have a little bit of a bio that I'd really like to share with all of you so that you can get to know her a little bit better. So Holly Fortier is a Cree Dene from Fort Mackay First Nation, Alberta. She was born in Treaty 7 territory and has been fortunate to be raised by cultural leaders, academics, and activists. She owns a business that specializes in the development and delivery of Indigenous awareness training. She has been delivering that kind of training across Canada since 2007 to thousands of participants from government, corporate clients, educators, service organizations, and first responders. Holly has also been involved in the Alberta film industry since the early 1990s in projects including North of the 60, The Assassination of Jesse James, Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, The Revenant, and many documentaries. She received the 2016 Institute for the Advancement of Aboriginal Women Esquel Award for Culture and the 2018 Alberta Aboriginal Role Model Award. She's on the board of NAIITS, an Indigenous Learning Community. She has recently launched a new film and television company called Two Canoes Media, teaming with Pyramid Productions of Calgary, veteran producers of thousands of episodes of television series and documentaries for international networks, including National Geographic, A&E, HBO, CBC, CTV, and Animal Planet. She says her biggest blessing is being a mother to her daughter and 2 sons, and co-home to 3 granddaughters. Please help me in welcoming Holly as our moderator for today's session.
Oh my gosh, you guys, thank you so much for inviting me into this conversation. I am just honestly thrilled to be here. Thank you, Idris, too, for the land acknowledgement. It's so beautiful, that we are doing land acknowledgements. Treaty 6 was signed between First Nations and Canada to share the land. And it was noted that it is to share the land for as long as the sun shines, the river flows, the grass grows. So that is forever. That's the spirit and the intent of treaties. So we have this relationship forever. And so I'm so thankful that we are in this relationship together. There are two great people joining me on the panel here. I'm just really thrilled. I want to read their bios for you. They're super impressive, and I'm just honored to participate with such great leaders, such as starting off with Alan Watts. Alan has enjoyed a career in sports and entertainment industry in his home city for 5 decades. Oh, Matt, you look good, Alan. His career began with the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation following graduation from Nate's first radio and television arts class. He spent 9 years as a sports commentator with the CBC and traveled the world covering CFL Great Cup championship games, the Vanier Cup, CIS Sport Championships, the Canadian Summer and Winter Games, Olympic Games, Pan American Games, and Commonwealth Games as a commentator and play-by-play broadcaster. He embarked upon a career as a sports executive with the Edmonton Eskimo football team and was part of the 5-in-a-row Grey Cup champion teams. After 16 years with the Edmonton Football Club, he left to join the Edmonton Oilers. Way to go, Alan. You must be really happy right now. And spent 15 years in the Oilers marketing, communication, brand, and broadcast department as a vice president. Perhaps the most notable of his career achievements with the Oilers was being in the 3-person formation group that included Oilers owner Cal Nichols and president Patrick LaForge, when the concept and creation of the Heritage Classic, the first NHL outdoor game held in Edmonton, went from a dream to reality. And we know how much we all love the Heritage Classic. Alan led the Oilers broadcast department through the negotiations and established landmark Oilers pay-per-view broadcast agreements, Sportsnet agreements, and the Chorus radio agreements. He returned to the Edmonton football team in 2013 and has since been leading the marketing teams or the team's marketing, communication, brand development. He notes that his most significant career achievement has been the team's name change and launch of the rebrand, which we'll be covering in detail here today. Among his other career milestones are serving as an honorary colonel in the Canadian Armed Forces, as well as serving on council for 16 years in the beautiful summer village of Silver Beach at Pigeon Lake, Alberta, 14 of which he was the mayor. Alan and his wife, Deborah, are proud Albertans, both born and raised in the greater Edmonton area. Alan owns several guitars, practices relentlessly, and dreams of retiring to be what he has always wished to be, an unemployed musician. That is amazing. So happy to have you here, Alan. I just loved reading that. It was just so full, and we're just deeply honored to have you here.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. I'd also like to introduce Len Rhodes. Now, Len brings extensive senior executive and leadership experience to organizations. He is board chair at Alberta Gaming, Liquor and Cannabis, AGLC. That's actually where I met Len, because I have been doing Indigenous awareness trainings with the AGLC for many, many years. So that's where we became friends. And as well as serving as a board member of the Western Canadian Lottery Corporation, WCLC. He spent 7 years as president and CEO of the Edmonton Elks, highlighted by the team winning the 2015 Grey Cup Championship. In addition, he hosted and chaired the 2018 Canadian Football League's Grey Cup Festival, cited as the most successful one in the history of the CFL. Len also served as the board chair for the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce and has diversified his governance experience by serving on non-for-profit community boards. Prior to moving to Edmonton in 2011, Len was Senior Vice President and General Manager at Reebok CCM Hockey, where he was responsible for their global operations based out of Montreal. Prior to that, he was Brand Director at Molson's Coors Brewery, building a reputation for successfully launching and revitalizing flagship brands. Len has worked and lived in Montreal, Toronto, and Edmonton. He has a love for business and a deep passion for community. Among his accomplishments, he was a recipient of the Government of Alberta's Inspiration Award. He was named to Alberta's Ventures Top 50 Influential People, as well as being named to Edmonton's Power 30 list. Len was also a participant in a Team Canada mission to support the Canadian Armed Forces overseas in Kuwait, Ukraine, and France. Len can also be seen wandering around the community with one of his service dogs that he fosters. His wife, Maureen, is co-owner of Aspen Service Dogs, and they share a passion for dogs that assist people with a wide range of disabilities. So welcome, Len, to our panel. This is so amazing.
Great to be here, Holly, and with you, Alan, as well.
Amazing. So as you can see, we have two incredible guests that are going to be answering some of my questions, but also we welcome guests from you, the audience. If you have something you'd like to ask, add it to the chat and I'll ask it for you. Or if you'd like to ask it yourself, then please click on the raised hand icon and I'll call you when the time is appropriate. So let's start with our questions. I'm super excited about this. Let's dive right in. So diversity, equity, and inclusion, which I will refer to the rest of this time as DEI, has received a lot of attention over the past few years. And I think that we can all agree this is of great relief. I, especially as a First Nation woman, am very thrilled about this. And it's well overdue. So before we get into the journey you both embarked on as you explored the potential name change from the Edmonton Eskimos to the Edmonton Elks, I'm curious, so what was the temperature for a name change before you began your consultation with the broader community? Let's start with whoever wants to answer that first, Alan or Len.
I think we should go to Len on that one first. I think that Len was the president of the team in 2015, and I think, Len, we can probably go to the Grey Cup in 2015 in Winnipeg when really things came to a head. But I'll let you tackle that question because I know you were front and center on that.
Yeah, sure, thank you, Alan, and thanks again, Holly. Yeah, I'd say the initial conversation that really took place was in 2015. So we were headed to the Grey Cup. We were amongst the last two teams. We were playing against Ottawa, and the game was held in Winnipeg. And during the week leading up to the Grey Cup, there's a lot of things going on. There's festivals, there's media events, there's fan events. So you're busy 24/7, literally for that full week. What was going on in the preparation to the game was also what we called at that point some noise regarding our name. Now, it is really a standard when you're going into Grey Cup that the opposing team often tries to derail you, to try to throw distractions at you. So when we heard about concerns about our name, I must say at that point in time, I was saying, oh, how the timing is just incredible, how this is coming up as we're going into the Grey Cup. And I just think it's just an attempt to distract the team from focusing on the game. So that week, I remember telling my football ops group, which includes the general manager, the coach, and all the staff, is to focus on what they had to do on the field leading into that game and to let me focus on all the other stuff. So that was how it really started to come about. It was an intense week, and we had a lot of people starting to talk, including the mayor of Winnipeg, a lot of people in the media, and several politicians. But so that was the start of what I would call a very long conversation.
I love that. And I remember you sharing that story with me when we first met. And I just found it fascinating because I've always wanted to learn about this process. And so would you now please walk us through the journey that you both embarked on as you explored whether or not the name change was something the broader community wanted? Like, how did this affect you personally? Would you be willing to share some of your own learnings from this process?
Well, I want to jump in ahead of Len here because I in order to undertake what we undertook, takes a considerable amount of courage, and it takes real leadership. The topic of our team name was always bubbling in the background and became, to Len's point, in and around 2015, it really became something that now politicians for all levels were discussing. Our mayor, our premier, the mayor of Winnipeg, the mayor of Toronto, and the prime minister. And when a Canadian Football League team tries to stage a Grey Cup or is part of a Grey Cup, all levels of government participate. And they do so because it's important for those communities to celebrate those events. It's pure Canadian. The Canadian Football League championship game, and indeed all games, are pure Canadian, in my opinion. And so when Len Rhodes, and I was working with Len at that time, when Len Rhodes, I'll never forget that time, he became very focused. And I'll let him, I'm speaking as though he's not in the room now, and that's not fair, but he became very focused on the notion that became more than just a notion, became an idea and then a reality that we had to deal with this. And so I'll stop there. And that you know, and Len will fill in the blanks about working for a board. We don't have an individual owner here. We work for a board of directors. That can be, there's tricky dynamics all the time when you have 9 men and women who are indeed your boss, and then you're expected to be the president and the CEO and take on these kinds of things. There is no single event in the history of this football club that has been taken on that is of more importance, period, end of story.
So in 2015, so the concerns came more frequent and more intense. And coming back from Grey Cup, we won the championship that year. So I guess we were successful in making sure the team focused on what they had to do on the field. But nevertheless, it was something that resonated in my mind. And Alan is someone that you all, you know, in our lives and various stops in our careers, we have our go-to people. Alan was always my go-to person because I could talk to Alan pretty well about anything, and we could call each other out in a room one-on-one, and you know, everything was on the table to be able to speak to it. Last night I went into my filing cabinet at home and I pulled out what we call the Route 2021. That was a 5-year plan that we prepared in 2016, and we brought it to the board. And we had outlined 10 strategic pillars, and one was the topic of the Eskimos name. We presented that to our board of directors, and I must say it was a very uncomfortable moment. There was a lot of discomfort in the room, just the fact that we would say we would need to talk about the name. Now, full disclosure, when this all started in 2015, I was among the skeptical people. I felt that we had always used the name with the utmost respect. That was where I was coming from. But at the same time, I wanted to understand more about the situation. And one of the people in 2015 that had spoken out was the leader of ITK, Nathan Obed. He's the president of the Inuit Tapiri Kanatami. He represents the 65,000 Inuit that live in Canada. And so he had spoken in the media, but we had never met, we had never conversed. And I remember asking Alan, do you think you could reach out to them? And I think they're in Ottawa, and they are, to ask if he could come visit us. And again, this was in 2016. We're going to invite him to our offices in Edmonton. He responded so well to that, and I think was shocked by the fact that we were inviting him over. And that was the beginning of a turning point. Because when he came, I saw a gentleman, I saw a professional person, and I expected someone to be really rude, really harsh on us, and it was the opposite. He just engaged in such friendly conversation, came with a soft approach, maybe a soft approach, but not flexible in terms of what his ultimate goal was, and explained that while we thought, we, the non-Inuit community, thought that we were treating the name with respect, he said the name itself was disrespectful, and he felt that we were treating the community as a moniker. The Eskimos' name and logo were monikers that were not used in the right way, and that caught my attention. And Alan and I remember after that first meeting him, said, my God, you know, he's a nice man. We need to understand more. And it was through the continued relationship through Nathan Obed that was the turning point for me to eventually do a complete 180 in terms of my approach to this. And one of the asks and conversations that we had at the board, and Alan can fill in a lot of the blanks, was we need to go meet the people. Everyone had a viewpoint, the media, sponsors, ticket season seat holders, politicians, general public, and everyone was all over the map. It wasn't though about hearing just the people talk about the Inuit if we weren't going to talk to the community themselves. So we had asked the board for permission to go into the north, into the Arctic where the Inuit are. We weren't going to invite them to see us. We were going into the communities, and we made a roadmap to go into the Northwest Territories, Yellowknife, Inuvik. We went to Nunavut, into Iqaluit. We made stops in Ottawa, and that was a journey to start one-on-one conversations with political leaders, business leaders, cultural leaders, but people from the Inuit community themselves. We needed to hear, you know, it's like having a conversation. Alan talked about speaking about me and as if I'm not in the room. Imagine that at a greater scale. We're saying what's right or wrong for the Inuit community, but for decades and a century, no one was asking the Inuit community about their opinions directly. So that was so important.
I think it was critical, just to add to that briefly, that it became a real educational process for us to discover that the word Eskimo does not exist in the Inuktitut language. That on their Nunangat, which is their land, we discovered that the names of the various regions, there's 4 or 5 of them up there, and they've been there for 15,000 years or more. And so it was, for us, it was a real educational process to discover that through no fault of our own, and we tried with complete respect. The people that named the team in 1948 were doing so trying to portray hardiness and the northernmost franchise in the Canadian football in pro sports. And really what they were doing was using a racist term to describe their name. And it only took us 70 some years to finally come to the conclusion after going on the land. And to Len's point, again, leadership saying, we need to get on an airplane. And I've been, through the 3-year process, I've eaten the country food. I've eaten muktuk and seal and char and all raw. I've been to their festivals. We've been welcomed. And I always say the same thing. I mean, I'm at a certain point in my career. I wish every grade 7 social studies child in Canada could get a chance to go north and see what our Arctic regions are like and learn more about the vastness of it and the ruggedness of the beauty of it. You know, I've stood in Tuktoyaktuk on the shores of the Arctic Ocean. Then the next stop is Siberia. You're welcome to try and swim there if you want. Wouldn't recommend it. And there's only 450 people living in the town, and it's a tourist attraction. It's an amazing, amazing place. And Len will tell you the same thing about our trip to Iqaluit, which really, I'll always remember meeting with a fellow by the name of Jack Onawak, who was a former member of Parliament. He's Inuit. Iqaluit's pretty far. It's 3 hours in a 737 north of Ottawa, and he's from a place that's very much further than that. He was taken away to a residential school at 5 years old, never saw his mother again. And so, and Jack was a really fascinating person, and so much so that we're at Kalowitz on the shores of Frobisher Bay. He wanted to take us for a boat ride. And just to show you how the thinking is a little bit different, Len said, well, that would be wonderful. We're a little crimped for time, but how long were you planning on going on the boat? And he said, well, it's going to be about 7 days. We're going from Frobisher Bay to Hudson's Bay. And we very quickly showed him our itinerary, and we weren't prepared for that at all. But it's so different. It really is, and so educational. And perhaps more than anything, we learned much more about what we were doing and how that was affecting Inuit and other Gwich'in and other people, Cree, Dene, up on the Delta, through no fault of our own.
Wow. I really believe that, Len and Alan, if more Canadians were like both of you, we would be in a better place, because it's really what you just described now. It's all about relationship building. And that's what you were doing, just listening. That's how you build a relationship, is through listening. And so I really appreciate that. And you mentioned Nate Nobad, and I've met him, and I just think, what an incredible leader. Last week, I met the Métis president, Cassidy Cairn. What a beautiful leader. And, and as a First Nation woman too, I see that when our people are in leadership who are traditional, there's that kindness. And you said that softness and that gentleness, but we have that strength and that resiliency as well. And so I'm so thankful that you recognize that. So I want to ask you, how did you balance the voices of those who wanted the change against the voices of those who didn't, or didn't seem to be aware at all, especially where many of the season ticket holders, which are your prime customer base, fell into the latter category?
That's the $1 million question. So right there, we had to say, if we're going to be showing the courage that Ellen spoke about, and as president and CEO, it's about leadership, and it's not always about the popular decisions. It's about doing what you think are the right decisions. And here's a few samples. I had one sports media journalist tell me, you better not dare even talk about changing the name or you're going to be run out of town. I said, okay, I'm ready for that challenge. I said, I'm going to figure out what's going on. And then whenever we decide, I'm going to have conviction one way or another. Our season seat holders, very traditional, probably 90%, according to different stats and surveys, felt there was no need for a change. And I always felt, once I went to the North, I wish I could have brought the hundreds of thousands of fans over on that trip with Alan and I to go meet the people, but we couldn't do that. And I remember years after the fact, leading up to the name change, Ryan Jesperson on Ched at the time had asked me about my view on that. And I said, Ryan, if I could have put everyone on the airplane, I know this would be an easier decision. The media, we had media and politicians from all corners of the country. I didn't really appreciate politicians speaking on behalf of the Inuit. I felt it was disingenuous. Many times, and most times, when I would ask, have you ever been in the communities? They had no idea. They had not been there. They really had no sense of what the issue was, but they were jumping on a bandwagon for jumping on. So different motivations for different people. When we went up north, it was clear they didn't have much appreciation for people speaking on their behalf from the South. And what's interesting is our reference points. When you went to Yellowknife, they referred to Edmonton as the South. When you went to Inuvik, they referred to Yellowknife as the South. Everything just has a relative space in this world. But there was no doubt, if you counted numbers, and we always said this is not about counting numbers, the vast majority would be in favor of the status quo. But in the 25 one-on-ones, and they were a minimum 1 hour each that we had in the Arctic and in the communities, even amongst the Inuit community was split. But those who were hurt were deeply hurt.
Mm.
The notion of residential schools was no longer something on a piece of paper. It was people telling their stories about them personally being in those schools, or their parents or their grandparents. And there were 2 times where I literally had tears rolling down my eyes. And that was the turning point. There was no turning back for me coming back from that trip. It was now, how do I get this through our board? How do I get this through all these potential barriers that are going to come into play? But in my mind, it was at any cost, I'm not going back, and I will be a crusader. And until a certain point, I was always careful with the choice of my words. When the media would ask, do you have plans to change the name? I had to answer no, because I had no authority to say yes without knowing if I could deliver on that. But I always wisely said the following: at this point in time, we have no plans to change our name, but behind the scenes, I was working my butt off to convince others and to make sure that we were tearing down the barriers towards that future of change. Alan?
Yeah, a couple of things that come to mind. The new governor general, who's Inuit, spoke today, and she said, she more or less said what we learned too, is that we went north to meet with Inuit leaders, elders, cultural leaders, and some of them said to us, one in particular, Lisa Burrill, who's the producer, director, and maker of a film called The Angry Inuk, and I would recommend everybody watch it. And that I'll never forget. It was searing, that interview. But the bottom line to a lot of this was people saying, look, a package of grapes in Inuvik, this big, cost $17. I bought 12 at Norman Wells at an anti-bullying conference. I bought 12 large bottles of water to take to the conference. It was $52. You guys came up here to talk about your team name when we'd have 20 people living in a 1,200 square foot bungalow with no internet, where suicide and lack of proper health care and proper housing and proper food sources are at the top of the list. And it's a long list, and your team name is way down the list. What are you doing? And so we at times we had to face that. Transpose that with, this is a community-owned team. One of the things that Len's proudest, that I'm proudest of, that everybody that's ever worked here or played here is proudest of, is our engagement with the community. During Len's tenure as president, we probably did anywhere between 600 and 800 community appearances a year. Right. Believe me, and most of those were in schools. What our team name was something that's not being taught in schools these days. And it was becoming more and more and more difficult to get into schools to talk about our team and coming to a game and football and how much you can enjoy it as a kid. Well, that's pretty much when the rubber hits the road. When a community-owned team can't get in the community to speak about it because of your team name, and because kids in grade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and on up, they were writing us letters. And so that forced us to listen. So while you have to listen, you have to have your ear to the ground, not only in your front yard, but in your backyard too. And to Len's point, our front yard was up north. We were looking up there and meeting. We didn't want to only be listening to, I'll put a point out, we didn't want to be listening to white politicians in the South. We wanted to actually go up north and meet with their leaders and their elders and their artists and their entertainers. And we did that. And we got some feedback. And it doesn't matter what the percentages are, whether it's 6 out of 10 or 5 out of 10 or 5 out of 5. If you invited 10 people for Christmas dinner and only 3 of them liked it and the other 7 didn't, would you serve that food again? Well, that was us.
I love that. And I love that, you kind of gave us a moment there, both of you, of a darker piece of our communities. And, when you talked about residential school, like my mother was 6 years old when she was taken from our community and put in residential school for 13 years. She was not allowed to return home. Home had no idea where she was taken. And my auntie was 4 and the other auntie was 6, 13 years. And we're still impacted by the legacy of those historical traumas. So when you talk about high suicide rates in the north, and you talk about, food inequality and provision and all of this. That's why it was so important that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission had 3 commissioners and a whole team go across Canada and do exactly what you have done. Listen. They listened to stories and they compiled a report. And within the final report of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, there's 94 calls to action. And I remember when Senator Murray Sinclair presented the document, he said, "Here, Canada, here's the final report. Now let's be friends." And I echo that sentiment. And so that's why this is really important, because it's part of reconciliation. Canadians are like, well, what do we do? I think when we look at reconciliation, let's remember the first thing is truth and learning the truth. And how do you do that? And it's by listening to the people, to our stories. You know, we can learn through the media, we can learn through our neighborhoods, our education systems. But if we listen to our stories, that's how we can move forward. So I want to ask you guys, most institutions struggled with even the smallest changes, and this was a massive change. So how did you gather the internal support at all levels, the board, the staff, the alumni, and the players? And was there additional external support you needed to build beyond those key voices as these efforts got underway?
Go ahead, Len, I'll let you start with.
I think the way to sell something is to believe in something. And there was a point when we had made a recommendation for doing consultation in the north that we would delegate it or outsource it. And I remember being told, you are going to be too busy because you got to prepare for hosting the 2018 Grey Cup Festival. And I said, no, I'm going. I am going, because I had to feel it. So coming back, once I felt it, it makes it in life so much easier to sell an idea. Now I recognize, even the board who I reported to, they're a great group of people, but they in many ways mirrored the fan base, very traditional, been with the team or followed the team or been involved with the team for years. Their parents were, their grandparents were, and they felt that truly they were doing everything with respect. But it came down to that, our definition of how we think we're using respect versus non-respect. I think the biggest credit comes actually to sponsors or non-sponsors / potential sponsors. When the noise started occurring, first of all, there was a sense I was starting to feel that some sponsors that had been with us were all of a sudden saying budget issues were coming up, or people that we were trying to bring in as new sponsors were being very polite, but not giving us the right time of day in terms of what the true concerns are. Because people very often prefer to give the easy answer. It's budgets, we can't partner with you. But I have someone who became a close friend who was with a bank, and I won't name that national bank, and it's not the national bank, it was a national bank, that said, our head office in Toronto doesn't want to touch you guys because there's too much potential controversy. And I said, oh my gosh. If one had the courage to tell me that, how many others are out there? So it's by sharing these stories to the board of directors and to, with media touch points, preparing people that we had to be open-minded to an eventual change. The times have changed. When the name was introduced 70 some years ago, it was a different cultural context, different setting. But as things change, so should we. And if our only concern was, we shouldn't change our name because it's always been our name, how dare them tell us to change it? Then I said, well, that's the worst excuse in the world.
I echo what Len's saying. If you can't ask your star players to go to speak to a grade 6 class because of your team name, and your vice president of sponsorship and partnership can't get in to talk to a national bank about being a partner of ours, then the handwriting's on the wall. And so, yeah, I will also add that I take great pride, I know Len does too, that we were amongst the first, we might have been the first professional team in any league in North America to, I would call it a well-established league, to change our name. That there will always be, they'll go to their graves, fans of ours who believe that they still want to call it the Eskimos. And we did not erase that name. We were 70 some years as that team and won 14 Grey Cup championships. I have 6 Grey Cup rings and the word Eskimo is on there. I'm not scratching that off, but we have stopped using the name. We have a new brand, a new name. And so I guess my point is that the Edmonton Football Club changed their name, and there will always be people in our community that it left a bruise. I get it. But the Cleveland baseball team in Major League Baseball is going through the same thing with their fan base, as is the Washington football team in the National Football League. And they will always have fans who will show up in their old jerseys. God bless them. You know, once to show up and it's, if you think it's easy to get to sell a ticket to go to any sporting event, it's the easiest thing in the world to do until you try it. And then you have to have all your ducks lined up. You have to have a good brand. You have to have one that people that'll resonate with, people that they can rally around and be supportive of. And so our club right now, we acknowledge that the process of changing our name was one thing. The process of moving on from our name to make sure that kid in grade 6 suddenly becomes a university graduate, gets a job, and lives here and is proud of what this football club managed to do. And this is going to take some time, but it's worth it. It's easy. It's in this business, as Len has pointed out, it's really easy to do things. It's really difficult to do the right thing.
Yeah, I love it. And, you know, as we know, myself and my people, we were called Indians for a long time because Christopher Columbus got lost. And to his dying day, when he, landed here on Turtle Island, that we now call present day North America, so Canada, the United States, when he landed on Turtle Island, he thought he was in India. And so we were called Indians for a long time until there was that respectful conversation. Okay, so what shall we call you? So that's another long story. I always, as Len knows, that I gave a full description of my Indigenous awareness training, but it's really about relationship building. Like, how do you want to be addressed? Like, I invite Canadians, find out, who your neighbors are, find out whose traditional territory you are, learn how to say the names properly. And, it's really about relationship building. We still use the term Indian in some contexts. As you said, you still use the term Eskimo in some contexts, but moving forward, there's respect in that way. So I honor that. So as you guys are a community-owned organization, do you feel the pressure is greater, like to get that DEI right?
Well, the club always did spectacular things. When you look at so I worked, as you had mentioned in my intro, at various corporations, but I never worked for a place like the Edmonton Elks. In terms of walking the talk, our players, our staff, like everyone within the organization, if you signed up to join and work on that team, it was more than being a football club. We would go to the food banks, the women's shelters. We were involved in so many great initiatives. I personally went to approximately 100 a year. So I took that close to heart and I said, that's not going to be a job. It's going to be a way of life. But the big one, which involved our name. So we're doing all these nice things. And yes, we're a community-owned team and there's pressure to do so, but there's also a desire to do so. But the biggest one was the one we were avoiding and always smiling and saying, oh, we think our name is okay because it doesn't bother us, or we don't think it bothers another group. So bad on us, bad on all of us. Alan, you talked about the other sports teams. We were probably first, but everyone waits, let's see if someone else goes. It took even more courage for us to push the dial and say, we need to be first, the first ones in North America anyway, to make such a bold move. And I think it opened the door for the others to follow, and then the dominoes just continue.
I have a lot of respect for that, you changed the name, you were the first, because that's a lot of conversation that, people often ask me, like, why are people changing their names? And I get this question asked a lot. And so I do respect the process that you went through. And like you said, well, it didn't really affect us, and it didn't really affect a lot of the people that we were talking to, but you went further. You took the extra effort. So, in your opinion, what gets harder when you're talking about diversity, equality, inclusion, and what gets easier? So what gets harder, what gets easier?
Alan, I think we all feel guilty, right? Like, I felt guilt for the fact that the residential schools took place. I felt guilt that I wasn't taught properly in school when I was growing up. I said, okay, I can't change the past, but I think it gets easier to talk about it when you know you can change the present and the future. And that is where we can take responsibility, because it's easy to blame someone else. It was our forefathers that screwed up, and they really did. And but what can we do about it now? And if we think, this life is pretty short, if we're looking ourselves in the mirror, because that's ultimately the test, is look at yourself in the mirror. Can you go to bed at night saying you did the right thing? Or are you so damn concerned about your job that you may lose it or cause conflict with people that you report to or that support you? And there came a point where I said, maybe because I've got gray hair, I've been through the block, I really don't care anymore. I'm going to do with what I think is right. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But I know when that ultimate thing came down, I spoke to the decision that, because I'd left the Elks before the actual change. I left in February 2019, and there was one outstanding thing to go through. But I remember two people when the name change had come through the club. I called my daughter, who's 30 years old. She lives in Montreal. And she had previously been the subject of my calls when I went into the Arctic and said, Melissa, I wish I could have taken you with me. You've got to learn. You could see so much that you haven't been taught in school. And the second one is I called Nathan Obed from ITK and told him how proud I was of the decision. And I said, Nathan, I know there were times you questioned my sincerity and whether you thought I was going to follow through. I am so proud, so proud. And it all started with him being that tipping point by engaging in conversation in such a respectful way.
That's all terrific stuff, especially on the Nathan Obeds. He's become someone that we text back and forth and contact. And if we're ever in Ottawa, we're always welcome there. So I think he's the most important politician in Canada that not many people have heard of.
Yes,
Really
Yeah.
do. And you don't get audiences with the Pope just because you happen to be in Rome. That doesn't work that way. And we all saw it on our television. I'll tell you what gets easier is just carrying on. It's my job here at the Elks. It's everyone's job here at the Elks is to just carry. Our job is wins and losses, and people coming to an event where the hot dogs are hot and the beer is cold and kids can have a soft drink or popcorn. That's our job. And we now are at the stage where it's been 2 years since we announced this, and it gets easier every day to watch the team run on the field, to see the uniforms, to see the name. It just becomes easier, and eventually it becomes part of the culture here. And the culture around a sports team starts in the locker room and ends in the boardroom. And so the two have to be very, very closely linked. And when everybody's on the same page, magic can happen. So our team name is our team name. This logo is our team logo. That's it. This is what we are in Edmonton, and we'll continue to do so. And so that, to me, that gets easier every day. And if you walk the hallways at most sports teams, a lot of the people are young. They're 28 years old, and they're very often very proud. Well, not very often. They're all very proud to be able to wear this logo, and all of what we did or anything that we might have accomplished is all in their rear view mirror right now, because they're just looking ahead. They want all of the things that I just talked about: fresh popcorn, cold pop, hot dogs, people having a good time, safe, secure. Going to sporting events first and foremost needs to be safe, and you shouldn't be having to walk through protests or anything else to get there and enjoy yourself.
Oh gosh, that's a really good point, isn't it? I didn't think of that. Thank you for sharing that. I actually really like the name. I like the logo. I think it's great. We have a question from the floor, so let's read that. It says, are there things you are doing or plan to continue to do to wave the flag for these types of discussions and changes as an organization? So are things you're doing or plan to do to wave the flag for these types of discussions and changes as an organization?
I'm going to give you a small example of that. And it's crazy. This is a classic Alan Watts story, perhaps, and I've got a million of them.
Oh my gosh, I think you do. Have you written a book?
No.
You need to write a book.
No, I don't know.
Yeah.
About 3 months ago, we got a call from a band in Germany who quite a popular band. They're a heavy metal band, and they use the word Eskimo in their band name. And they were getting pressure from not from amongst their hardcore fan base. Their hardcore fan base wanted them to keep their name, but they couldn't get record deals, and they were going on a tour of North America. They'd been invited by a promoter to be a part of a tour, and they were discovering that they weren't quite so popular in some of the places they were thinking of going because of their team name. So it really was a mirror of exactly the same things that we'd gone through. It gave me the opportunity to have a conversation just like this with these young guys who were so neat to talk to. And, you know, we had a lot of fun on 2 or 3 calls just like this. And they eventually changed their name.
That's amazing. I think too that, you know,
I couldn't whistle along to any of this. I couldn't hum or whistle any of their songs, but anyway. There's a lot of hair and, you know.
You know, and I think too that when even this conversation here is such an education, honestly, I offered to, and when I got the invite to share the space with you, I did it for selfish motives because I really wanted to be part of this conversation, because I think it's such an amazing topic. And this whole, I think Canadians need to understand this. As a filmmaker, my producer hat is just going on. I wish that we had followed you on that journey. Yeah. And I wish that we had documented that on film, because film has a far reach, right? And we could people can just, you know, push play and hear this story. And it's so important. I love that this band from, you know, heavy metal, like totally out of your, well, I don't know, maybe you love heavy metal, but out of your music genre as a guitar player, comes to you to have this conversation. You're well informed and well equipped to address that. So I really do appreciate, you know, now that those of us who are in this, you know, in the audience listening to you, now we can be informed to go tell 2 friends, and then they can tell 2 friends. So it's really important just having the dialogue.
One thing I want to, while it's still fresh in my memory here, is to and maybe get Len to comment too, is that any company that is thinking, or any group or organization or civic group of any kind that's thinking of changing anything as something as important as your overall company name. One of the things that Len and our board did was to include third parties. We were fortunate to have a company called Edelman, and we didn't just go meet and do interviews by ourselves. That's Len and Alan having a cup of tea with somebody in Inuvik or Iqaluit. But when you bring a researcher with you to take notes and document and gather the data, then it becomes much more than that, and very important. And I think we did the right thing all the way along there, that Edelman was included in it. And then when we came to design logos and roll out our new brand, DDB was of great help to us to make sure that one of the things that we could have done was try and do too much. And sometimes the simplest plans and the simplest logos work the best. And I think that Len, I think that having Edelman and two women in particular who were really instrumental in making sure we were guided through it, and that we didn't just veer off and end up upside down in the ditch, to use a metaphor.
Yeah, we brought in Edelman, you know, they're the pros at helping the process for consultation. And when we came back and we had an executive summary, 5 or 6 bullets that could be each a headline in their own, it gave it more credibility to the people we had to sell into, because it wasn't Alan or Len just putting the personal biases into play. It was a real tight process that came into it. You know, that leads to another thing is DEI, you know, diversity, equity, inclusion. It reminds me now in corporate world, everyone's talking ESG, environmental, social governance. All good, but be careful the buzzwords of a year or a decade, because where's the substance? Where's the authenticity? I have more time for someone that tells me one thing they may have done that made a true difference, that is genuine and authentic with the right intention at play, than someone who gives all the buzzwords, and meanwhile, the moment they're finished talking about it or leave their office, they go about doing things the way they always did it. Now, we're not perfect and we're not angels and we're not, you know, we're all making mistakes as human beings every day. But if we learn, and I love the expression fail forward, so that we're better tomorrow than we were today, and better today than we were yesterday, we all win.
Yeah, that's amazing. We're getting some good questions here, and I want to just go to a question that I got in the chat. And it said that you said 90% of the fan base or stakeholders were initially opposed to changing the name. So was there more support as the discussion went on?
I think that scan of our season seat holders at 87%, anywhere between 87 and 90%, was early on in the process when the word got out. And I think that the more we got to tell our story, if we scanned them today, it'd be much different, because they've come to realize, we've all come to realize what's taking place in our world, what's taking place here right in our community. You know, I think it was an awakening process for all of us. We happened to be able to go across the north to the 5 regions where and see that, but not every fan could, not every season seat holder could. So of course they voted with their heart. Of course that's why they're called fans. I mean, other people have customers, we have fans, and you know that. And that's important for us. That's critical to us. And to a large degree, I'm proud of the way they reacted. It's like, doggone it, that's my team, that's my town, and here you guys are trying to do this. But eventually they got to see exactly what we are up against, what our community is up against.
You know,
and we,
to add
again,
to that, I think in life, I think the vast majority of people are good people. That's like, if that weren't the case, I'd give up on life. Like, we are in a good universe. The bad ones get the attention. But the good people, many of our fan base, the same 90% that were opposed to a name change, are not bad people. They in their heart truly did not see how they were being racist or disrespectful. I truly believe it was a lack of education or knowledge that was the deciding factor. Not because they ever used the word in a way they thought was negative towards a group of people, because they would tell us we haven't done anything wrong. But when you start with the premise that the name itself was problematic, not just how you used it, that changed the conversation. And yes, over time heals a lot of things. And I think when the club showed there's no more wavering, there's going to be a name change and we're going forward, you either had to get on the bus or get left way behind decades past.
Do you think you broadened your fan base by the name change?
Alan?
I think yes. The answer to that question is yes. I think we did, because I think that people suddenly were or more aware, particularly amongst school kids and even minor football players, kids playing bantam football in our junior high flag football program, which has an inordinate number of young women, young ladies, young female players in it, many of whom are showing their male counterparts exactly how good they can be at it. It's tons of fun, but they're way more in tune now than they ever were with our team name and the team logo. And I think that, again, you're always in this business of nurturing and sustaining your current fans, but you also have to be in the business of nurturing and hoping to sustain someone that's 12 now, but will eventually grow. Because if you don't do that, you lose you lose a generation, and then you're really in trouble. And it has nothing to do with affordability or whatever. Our product is available. You can get it online, you can get it on the radio, you can get it on television. There's all kinds of ways to consume our product without having to we want them to come to games, but you also want to be able to broaden all of those platforms, all the social media platforms. You want to be able to talk to them you want to talk to a 12-year-old on the platforms the 12-year-old uses. You want to talk to the 28-year-old on the platforms they use, and the 45-year-old on the ones they use. And I think this process has given us an opportunity to have more engagement in all those demographics.
I agree. You know, I'm a grandmother. In our language, you say cookum. And so that's Cree, we say cookum. Here's a Cree language lesson for you, because Edmonton is on traditional territory, Cree people. Grandmother is cookum, grandfather is mushum. So if you forget, you go, how do you make mashed potatoes? You cook them and you mush them. So as a cookum, I look at that younger demographic and I just think, you know, they're very aware and very conscious. And so I appreciate that, you know, and I think that maybe a lot of people didn't, you know, were opposed to changing the name because they didn't understand. But the younger generation that's coming up, they're having these authentic conversations from K to 12 and post-secondary. So I'm really thankful for that movement of young people.
I can give you an Inuktitut language lesson.
Okay.
Quickly.
Yes, please.
At the Sunrise Festival in Inuvik, held every year in January, the most ill-named festival in the world because the sun's only up for about 45 minutes. But anyway, I was standing in the buffet line and there was a 12-year-old young boy behind me. And I said, well, what is that? And the person said, that's muktuk. I said, what is that? It's raw whale meat. And so there was a pause. I didn't say anything. And the young guy behind me said, it tastes better with HP sauce. So I tried it. It was good.
Did you try it? You tried it? It was good?
I tried it all. Yeah. Yeah.
That's great. That's relationship building too. Try our foods, you know. We have a really great question from the floor, and I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say about this one. As you know, the Pope, so Pope Francis, is from the Roman Catholic Church, is planning to visit Edmonton this summer. What advice would you give him as he strives to reconcile with Canada's Indigenous peoples?
Oh, you know, he's the Pope, but he's not God. And he's got a lot of weight on his shoulder. Let's say what he should not do. Stop defending the past. Admit to it that it was wrong. Say you're sorry from your heart and soul, and talk about what you're going to do going forward. I'm no expert, and gosh, you know, the Pope is great. I'm Roman Catholic, but there's things, just because you're Roman Catholic doesn't mean to say you should have blind following onto something. There's been some real bad situations and errors of the past. And if, you know, it's like anyone with an addiction, the most simple premise is first you have to admit you have a problem, then you could solve the problem. That's where you've got to. And this whole jockeying for position on what's the right conditions to say you're sorry, like that's not good.
Yeah, I appreciate that. When the Vatican announced that they wanted a delegation of survivors and leaders from Canada to go over to have a conversation, there was no expectation, but I know the leaders were saying, just say 3 words. Say 3 words. I am sorry. And we knew as filmmakers that we wanted to be there. So we sent our camera operator over. It was a week on the ground, run and gun. It was like very full. And, so I got a firsthand account of how powerful it was, because he did say, I am sorry, on March 28th to the First Nation, the Métis and the Inuit, and on April 1st to the First Nations. Apologies are huge. I've studied this extensively, and when your perpetrator apologizes, there's healing. It's very simple. And I love what you said, don't defend the past, but just have the conversation and let's make it right. As Canadians, I know that a lot of people, like you mentioned earlier, Len, a guilt or a shame. But if we get stuck in guilt and shame, it freezes us, and we don't do any motion because we're so afraid of doing the wrong thing. But I think that if we can just say, let's make the steps. How do we do that? And like I said before, reconciliation, everybody's like, it's a buzzword. What are we doing? How do we do it? Reconciliation is first learning the truth, doing your own research, and maybe your books, your podcasts, your audiobooks, wherever, and educating yourself, take courses, through the U of A, or like my courses, or like through your local parks and recreations, libraries, museums, like do all of that and educate ourselves, because, it is really what you said, just to have the conversation. And I really feel that, I think that Canadians feel a lot of shame and guilt, but let's not get stuck there. Let's move forward in that relationship. Here's how did you go about making sure that diversity, equity, and inclusion were at the forefront of this new brand? And I have to say personally, when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, I always like to include the word belonging. Because we recognize we're diverse, we want to be equal, you're welcome in. But then I always think, well, we belong there the whole time. So I really like kind of sneaking in the word belonging. But how did you go about making sure that DEI were at the forefront of this new brand?
Well, believe me, there was a lot of work done on even selecting a name. And, I'll be honest, the word, there was a word like empire, and another one like energy. And the more you study that is this is what happened to Indigenous people across Canada. An empire came and took away pretty much everything they had. So you kind of don't want to go there. And energy, because we're in northern Alberta, north central Alberta, and energy is critical and key here. But we wanted to move away from that, because we didn't want to get in the debate of electrical energy or sustainable energy or carbon-based energy. And you think back 10 years ago, if you would have been picking a team name, of the things you didn't have to consider in and around empire or energy or eclipse or whatever, because again, eclipse was there, but what we were trying to do? Was eclipse and ignore, turn dark, everything that, so believe me, there was a lot of discussion and a lot of research went into the selection of a name that would really represent what we were trying to do, but was not backhanding anybody along the way.
What message do you feel the hiring of Victor Cui, a Southeast Asian Canadian, as the club's new president, sends to the sports community and to the underrepresented people of our region right now?
Well, Glenn, you want me to go first on that one? Sure. First and foremost, Victor Cui is an Edmontonian. He's from here, and so that just as when Len was hired to be president, Len was a Canadian and had lots of experience in Canadian sports. And Victor's background, Len's background, they came to lead this organization because they were leaders, because they built things. Victor Cui built a product in Asia, won championship, a mixed martial arts product that's valued at 1.2 billion US. And then chose to come back to Canada to live here and live in Edmonton. But he can take you. He delivered pizzas in Clairview, so he knows where every street is, and that's important. And the one thing that I'll say about so I because he's from a visible minority in our country. He never walks through the hallways or goes anywhere like that. I know it's there, but he sees himself as someone that's here to be an Edmontonian first and foremost.
I love that. Sometimes, like, I feel like I walk through the world as a Canadian, and then once in a while I'll experience racism or somebody, commenting to me on my indigeneity. But I feel the same as Victor. Like I'm, from the region. I'm Canadian, and I love that, that belonging. Alan, as the current VP of Marketing Communications, what do you struggle with the most when it comes to aligning the public-facing messaging to the organization's DEI principles?
Well, that's a very good question, and not an easy one to answer, but I try and answer it the easy or by making the message clear easily, which is, we have to take this team to the street every day of the week. Every day of the week, we have to make sure that we are doing things. Today, we announced Ashley Collingbull as a co-host for our games. That's a deal changer for us. She's going to be with Chris Sheets on the field. She's going to be doing other things. She has over 1 million followers and is really excited to be here and be a part of us. But we don't market just that. That's part of what we're doing to say everybody's welcome here, and we want everybody included here. And if you take a look at our team picture, the 90% of the people that are in the team picture are of color, and 70% of them, or 50% of them are not from our country. And we want them to come here and play professional football and be in the community and hopefully settle here. And they do. And so that's at the very core of what we try and do here, which is to gather these young men together and have men and women manage them and get them through their day and get them through their season. And then when the season's over, get them included in the other things we do if they want to stay here. And eventually, the most success you can have as a Canadian Football League team, and this goes back to the Hugh Campbell days, is when suddenly the guy that came here single is married and he's got kids that are starting play school. Now you have a citizen. And it doesn't matter whether he's from Anniston, Alabama or Ardrossan. So that's kind of where we go as an organization on it every day.
Yeah, representation matters. Victor Cui and Ashley Collingbull, your players that are people of color, Black, Indigenous people of color have always stood in solidarity because of our experiences. And so we love it when we have allies like yourselves being on board with us. It's wonderful.
And Len will tell you this too, that the best brand ambassadors you can have for any brand, whether it's a running shoe or a football team, are people who don't work for you, who are advocates for your brand because it's a good brand and because you're doing things right. The league is embarking on a series of videos right now, and one of the key voices in the videos musically is Cadence Weapon, who's from here and is the grandson of Rolly Miles, who
Wow.
came here to play in the 50s under trying circumstances. And again, to my point, Cadence Weapon is a voice of us, not because he's of color or because he's a hip hop or a rap artist. It's because he's an Edmontonian, a Canadian. And to have him on top of the message that we're trying to get to people across the country, I think is pretty important.
Mhm. Len, question for you. What surprised you the most now that you can look back on the journey you presided over that saw the Eskimos eventually become the Elks? Like, what surprised you the most?
Surprised me the most. Well, it surprised me the most is that it still took too long. It's my decision was made years before it actually happened, so there was a sense of frustration. I'm an impatient type of guy to begin with. Alan could attest to that. I want results. I want the best, and there's a time to talk and there's a time to do. So I felt there was too much talking once it was clear that we had to make the change. So that would be more of a something that maybe didn't surprise me, but that frustrated me. But out of that, we continue. So I'm no longer with the Elks, but everything you do, if we all believe that we can make a positive change somewhere, it's an incredible thing. Right now, as a board chair at Alberta Gaming, Liquor and Cannabis, we just appointed a new board member who is Métis. So now we have Indigenous representation on our board. So wouldn't that be tragic if I went through all of that at the Elks and then I go on to something else and then I forget about all the things that we should be doing? We talk about diversity and we have great diversity on the board at AGLC, but we lacked one element. And the payday for that was I had Chief Billy Morin, who's the Enoch Cree chief. He was in our offices a month ago, and he asked me, he says, Len, when are you guys at AGLC going to have Indigenous representation at the table? I said, Chief Morin, we've done it. And it was a few weeks earlier. He looked at me almost in disbelief. And then his assistant looked on the phone and she held it up. He's right. I go, I know I'm right. Her name is Maureen Manetta. She's now with us. And he said, that is incredible. So to see the twinkle in the eyes, that's the payday. That's what it's all about. And it's so much easier to have representation of your target than to have a homogeneous group of people deciding things in terms of what should be right for someone else. The world, the young demos are so much further than we've ever been. I think the internet has brought that. It's taken borders down. People don't care what country they're in and they see things in a different way. So I'm very optimistic about the future. The CFL was lagging and they had a mature demographic. It's because they kept talking to the same people. So a lot of things that Alan's talking about, what they're doing now going forward, I think is an important step for the viability of the league and for the team in the long term.
Here's one that surprised me. I try and play golf all the time, and I'm like everybody else, I'm not very good at it, but I was on the driving range at the Black Bull Golf Course out by Pitchen Lake. And there was a fellow next to me there and I had my Elks hat on. And so finally he said something to me about the Elks. And I could tell right away that where this was going to come from, because I introduced myself to him and he said that his last name was Littlechild. And I said, well, I think I know a relative of yours, and Willie Littlechild. And he said, oh yeah, that's my uncle. And I thought, oh man, this is good. So anyway, we had the best conversation about just the things that we're talking about right here, about the name and about all of that. And finally, at the end of it all, he was ready to go play. And he turned to me, he said, can I have your hat? And so I said, yeah, if I can have your driver. But anyway, so he's now wearing an Edmonton Elks hat. And I get that a lot. And I'm always proud to engage in those conversations. But believe me, 3 years ago, we weren't having them. And so to be able to have them, that's what surprises me, is that we're able to have here's someone I had never met before. He'd never met me. We'd never been at a banquet or any of the other stuff. But here we were talking about this on a Sunday when we're out just having fun. And to me, that tells me that we're there. We're okay. This is going to be, it's going to turn out okay.
I agree with you. I've been doing work like this for my entire life, and I'm, like I said, a cookum. And so I've been at this work for a long time. And honestly, I feel like we've turned a corner. I'm very hopeful. We have turned a corner. And what's giving me hope is this conversation. I see representation everywhere, like even in this conversation. And, I'm from Fort McKay First Nation, which is north of Fort McMurray. So we are ground zero of the world's third largest oil reserve. And as a filmmaker, the Arctic Winter Games came to me and said, would you do a land acknowledgement that we're going to show at every event on the Jumbotron? So cool, eh? It was such an honor to do that. And so now, not just the games are going to use it, but they're showing it at every hockey game. They're showing it at the beginning of meetings. And they're just, saying, we want to say that where we now live, work, and play is Indigenous territory. Canadians have been here for a few hundred years, but Indigenous people have been here for time immemorial. So we honor ancestral land. And we see that in sports, where the land acknowledgement, like you said, Willie Littlechild, we're all watching the Oilers games where they're doing the where Willie Littlechild does the land acknowledgement. So I'm so hopeful. We have a lot of work to do, but we have turned a corner, and I'm so thankful. There's a question from the floor coming in right now, and it's for Alan. And it says, with about 90% of the fan base initially being resistant to a name change, what was the biggest marketing and communication challenge you faced to get the community buy-in for the new name? And what strategy did you employ to overcome the challenge?
We included them. We included them in the process. 90% of our season seat holders, 87% of them were not happy about the fact that we were changing the name. They wanted to keep it. So if I gathered all of the alumni in all the players that used to play for the football team and gathered them in the dressing room, and I've done that, it's pretty raw. But if you don't include them, then they're not being heard, and that's what I discovered along the way was the things that we needed to do was include our season seat base, include our casual ticket purchasers, include our alumni, include former board members and governors, include the citizens at large, all across. When we asked people to vote on the final list of 7 names, we had something like 40-some thousand votes come in. Well, believe me, there are people that are trying to get elected out there that would love to have 40,000 people vote in any way, shape, or form, either for them or against them. And that's what we did. So the biggest thing that we did, the most important thing we did to answer your question is what I started with. We included them. And it was tough going from time to time. I'll be honest. It was raw, and there was some anger about, I'm right, you're wrong, and you're not listening to me, Mr. Watt, or the organization. That's okay. That's what Len and I do. That's why we're here. And
We have just a few more minutes left, and we could carry on this conversation. Well, I feel like I could. I'm just learning so much for you, and I have so much respect for you both. So I would just want to ask you both, just to finish up this conversation, what advice would you both give to other organizations or companies based on your experience?
I would say always put yourself in the other person's shoes. It's that simple, yet that complicated. It takes work, and it takes you putting your ego aside, and it forces you to be open-minded. But if you approach it with all those factors in play, the sky's the limit. Don't hold on to the past if it doesn't allow you to grow or your organization to grow. There's so much potential out there, but be open-minded, show empathy, and put yourself in their shoes.
Such good
I would,
advice.
I would agree is to really, first of all, figure out where it is you want to go, which Len alluded to. You know, we really wanted to go there a lot faster than we thought we would get there, but we never lost sight of the goal line, ever. And and it's so easy to be distracted. It's so easy to be discouraged. It's so easy to have your ownership change or your board change, and people go, yeah, that was the old board. That's not what we want to do. You have to you got to stay the course, and eventually you will prevail. And the other thing that I would say too is that don't make it a one-off. If you're making a big change like we did, please don't make it a one-off. Don't just, we cannot, this organization has to go back north again, and we plan to do that. We have to take players up to the schools. All of the things that I talked about in terms of housing and food scarcity and healthcare and bullying and all of that are still taking place. And so we should be a part of, in fact, Len and I heard that. Len, I think you'd agree with me. They said, please don't be the guys that came from the South once every 25 years, and we won't see you again for another 25. We can't be that. We cannot be that organization, and we don't plan to be that organization.
Well, I just wanted to say that I've enjoyed this conversation so much. I have so much respect for the both of you. I'm deeply humbled to be in your presence, and thank you. Thank you for all the work that you've done. Thank you for being allies to Indigenous people. As a First Nation woman, I'm grateful to you both. And thank you for inviting me into your space here. And I think that we'll just give it to Idris to have our closing comments. Thank you.
Absolutely. I want to thank you all, Alan, Len, and Holly, for this expansive and relevant conversation, not only loaded with takeaways and lessons, but talking about how to actively share the table. And I think this is something that, leading organizations don't really have their head around. And, it's just a profound thing. I know we're running out of time, so I'm going to be very quick. I also want to make special thanks to our sponsor, DDB Canada, for their support of this event and their ongoing support of the Ad Club of Edmonton with our annual awards show and other things. It's been a vision to bring events like this to our membership, but it's through our partnerships that we're really able to realize those things. So thank you so much. I also must thank our co-presenter, the Calgary Marketing Association, who have been instrumental in presenting this with us, and we look forward to even more work together. Which brings me to the next thing, which is our next DEI event, June 9th. So this is also online, and it's called Skipping Stones. There's a whole bunch of information. There's tickets available now. So please keep your eyes peeled for it. Check out our website, check out our newsletter, check out our social media. There's a whole bunch going on yet still. And the conversation must continue. So on behalf of the Ad Club of Edmonton, thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming. And thank you to our guests and our host, Holly. Take care.
Thank you.